Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you. Wherever you're tuning in from tonight, perhaps snug and cozy in bed, nestled in your favourite quiet corner at home, or maybe unwinding in some peaceful spot as the world outside quietly fades away. I'm truly delighted that you've chosen to join me here. Take a slow, deep breath in, and let it out gently. Feel your shoulders soften and drop. Perhaps pull the blanket or covers up just a little higher, and allow the day to softly slip away from you. The Vienna State Opera House was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant crystal chandeliers caught every flicker of light. Velvet drapes framed the boxes like proscenium arches, and the air carried the scent of hothouse lilies, Chanel No. 5, and the faint, rich trace of Cuban cigars. Then, as during the second intermission of the Gala die Fledermaus, Baroness Elsa von Hohenberg was found slumped in her private box, her face twisted, a shattered champagne flute beside her. The waltz had just swept to its glittering close. Police saw a tragic accident or perhaps a discreet suicide, but Hercule Poirot saw a performance. Someone in this gilded theatre of wealth was playing the role of murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The Vienna State Opera House burned with Art Deco elegance on the frosty evening of January 18th, 1935. Polished mahogany panelling reflected the soft glow of 100 sconces. Crystal pendants tinkled overhead like distant champagne corks whenever a door opened. Silk evening gowns rustled past velvet drapes. Kid gloves smoothed lapels. The parquet floor clicked under patent shoes. In the grand foyer, a grandfather clock chimed the half-hour, with deep, measured strokes while waiters circulated trays of chilled Veuve Clicquot and strong continental coffee. Baroness Elsa von Hohenberg reigned from the royal box, centre, first tier, as was her right as the opera's principal patroness. Her Worth gown shimmered the pale gold of old champagne. Diamonds at throat and wrist caught every flicker of light. She leaned forward slightly, gloved hands resting on the cold marble balustrade, watching the stage with the possessive gaze of ownership. Beside her sat Baron Klaus von Hohenberg, tall, silver-haired, adjusting his cufflinks with precise, economical movements. Their only child, Liesel, 19 and fragile in pale rose silk, sat between them, eyes wide and shining as the orchestra tuned for the second act. Moments earlier, the impresario Otto Klein had entered the box carrying a fresh bottle of vintage champagne on ice. From Fräulein Carlotta Bianchi, he announced with a small bow, with deepest gratitude for your continued generosity. The Baroness had smiled thinly, accepted the gift, and poured herself a single flute. Otto departed, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from his tailcoat sleeve as he went. The first act had ended in applause like gentle rain. Society rose, stretched, drifted toward salons and corridors. Footsteps echoed along marble halls. Distant piano music floated from a rehearsal room. Silk rustled. Laughter sparkled briefly, then died. In the royal box, the Baroness sipped her champagne, remarked quietly on the soprano's phrasing, then fell silent. The intermission was perhaps 7 minutes old when the scream came. Not theatrical, but raw and animal. The box attendant, a thin young man in uniform, burst through the velvet curtain and froze. Baroness Elsa lay back in her chair, head lolled, eyes half open and glassy. The champagne flute lay shattered on the carpet, golden liquid pooled beside a single white rose that had fallen from her corsage. Beneath the heavy perfume and lilies hung a faint, wrong note, bitter almonds. Police arrived within 20 minutes. Inspector Müller of the Viennese Criminal Polizei entered in a heavy tweed overcoat, cigar smoke still clinging to the rough wool. He examined the body briefly, sniffed the glass, noted the blue lips, and pronounced it likely an unfortunate accident, perhaps too much champagne combined with a weak heart. His men began the routine: photographs, fingerprints, removal of the bottle and glass. But Hercule Poirot had been present that evening as guest of honour. An old friend from the Belgian legation had secured him a seat in a neighbouring box. Now he stood quietly at the rear of the royal box, small and immaculate in black tie, his egg-shaped head tilted as he surveyed the scene. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. "Observe, mon ami," he murmured to the invisible audience that always attended his thoughts. "This stage is set with exquisite care. Every detail perfect, the lighting, the props, the cast in position. Yet one small thing is wrong. One actor has already forgotten a line." Poirot stepped forward. He noted the overturned flute, the position of the Baroness's hands, still gloved, fingers slightly curled, the open window letting in a thread of chill night air that stirred the velvet drapes. He bent, sniffed delicately at the rim of the broken glass. Bitter almonds, unmistakable, cyanide, not accident, not suicide, performance, the cast assembled in fragments during the next chaotic half-hour. Baron Klaus played devastated husband with classical restraint, pale face, steady voice, one hand resting on his daughter's shoulder. Liesel performed shocked innocence, handkerchief pressed to dry eyes, lips trembling, voice a whisper. Carlotta Bianchi swept in, still wearing her Rosalinde costume, silk, feathers, dramatic décolletage, expressing horror with wide dark eyes and a perfectly timed gasp. Otto Klein returned breathless, papers clutched to his chest, insisting he had merely delivered what was requested. Rudolf Lang, the rival industrialist who had quarrelled bitterly with the Baroness over control of the opera's subsidy, lingered at the doorway in polished shoes, watching everything with cool, hooded eyes. Poirot arranged 3 small objects on the marble-top table: a silver cigar cutter, a folded program, a dropped kid glove, into perfect symmetry. He drew himself up, still small, and spoke softly, almost to himself. "The psychology, it is everything. Every person here wears a mask. Some masks are thin, some thick. But Hercule Poirot, he directs this little theatre until every mask slips. You watch with me, no? You see how the hands tremble, or how they do not." The body was covered and carried away on a discreet stretcher, and the champagne bottle vanished into an evidence bag. The opera would not resume that night. The great curtain remained down. The stage was set. The players had taken their marks. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The morning after the tragedy, January 19th, 1935, the Vienna State Opera House felt strangely hushed. The grand foyer, usually alive with silk rustle and champagne corks, now carried only the faint scent of furniture wax and wilting lilies in tall crystal vases. A low fire crackled in the marble fireplace of the private salon, reserved for important guests. Its warmth fought the chill that seeped through tall windows. Outside, snow fell softly against the glass, muffling the city sounds. Hercule Poirot had requested this small, elegant room for the first formal interviews. He sat at a polished mahogany table, with 3 objects arranged before him in perfect order: a fountain pen, a clean white handkerchief, a programme from the previous night. Inspector Müller had grudgingly allowed Poirot to conduct these preliminary conversations. Psychology, order, and method, Poirot had said with a small expressive gesture of his small hands. The stage is still warm. Let us see who performs truth and who performs memory. The players entered one by one, each taking their mark as though the room were a smaller theatre. First came Baron Klaus von Hohenberg. He entered in a dark morning suit of excellent cut, silver hair brushed smoothly back. He sat with the posture of a man who had spent a lifetime commanding rooms. His voice remained low and controlled. Elsa was the heart of this house, he said, folding his hands on the table. She lived for music, oh, for beauty. Her death, it is beyond comprehension. Poirot watched carefully. The Baron's eyes were dry. His fingers never trembled. When he spoke of finding his wife, his tone stayed even, almost rehearsed. Watch this performance, Poirot murmured, as though addressing an invisible audience. The grief is there. Correct volume, correct posture. But observe the eyes, mon ami. Where are the tears? Where is the redness? Truth stumbles, lies flow smooth. Next entered Liesel von Hohenberg. 19 years old, pale as winter roses, she wore a simple grey wool dress that still managed to look expensive. She twisted a lace handkerchief between slender fingers and kept her gaze lowered. Mother was everything to me, she whispered. She wanted only the best, for the opera, for me. I was with her the whole intermission. I never left the box. Her voice cracked at the end, artfully, almost perfectly. Yet, when she raised the handkerchief to her face, it remained completely dry. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. Ah, but you say she never left the box. Yet a maid saw a young lady in rose silk in the corridor at that very time. A small detail, perhaps. But the careful observer, and you are becoming careful, non, will notice how the handkerchief never quite touches the skin. Carlotta Bianchi arrived third, dramatic even in mourning. She wore black silk day dress trimmed with jet beads. A single strand of pearls gleamed at her throat. She swept to the chair, sat, and immediately produced tears, large, glistening, perfectly placed on flawless cheeks. I sent the champagne only as thanks, she said, a voice trembling with exactly the right amount of emotion. The Baroness had promised me the lead in Der Rosenkavalier. I would never harm her. Never. Mascara remained miraculously intact. The tears traced neat paths but never smudged. Poirot smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. Bravo, he said softly. But the performance? It is too perfect. Genuine sorrow ruins the makeup. Real grief is messy. This grief, it is cosmetic. You see it now, non? Otto Klein came next, brisk and businesslike, a leather portfolio under one arm. He wore a well-pressed suit, tie knotted with precision. He spoke quickly, efficiently. I merely delivered the bottle as requested by Fräulein Bianchi. The label was correct, the ice fresh. I left immediately. I had a meeting with the conductor. His smile stayed fixed, helpful, professional. Yet when Poirot mentioned the opera's accounts, small irregularities recently noticed, Klein's left hand rose instinctively to adjust his collar. A tiny, betraying gesture. The mask slips, Poirot said quietly. Did you catch it? The helpful manager suddenly needs air. Finally, Rudolf Lange appeared at the doorway. Tall, lean, impeccably tailored in charcoal grey, he regarded the room with cool detachment. We had disagreements over funding, yes, public ones, but poison in the royal box? Absurd! He sat without being invited, crossed one leg over the other, and met Poirot's gaze directly. Too directly. Poirot arranged the pen, handkerchief, and programme into even straighter lines. Consider the psychology, he said. What role does this man need to play? The disinterested rival, the innocent bystander. If you were hiding something, well, how would you perform innocence? Each interview lasted no more than 15 minutes. Yet, in those short scenes, contradictions bloomed like missed cues in a dress rehearsal. The Baroness had told her secretary only 2 days earlier that she intended to withdraw half her annual subsidy. News that would ruin Otto Klein's careful budget. Carlotta claimed the champagne was a spontaneous gift, yet the bottle came from a private reserve stocked only in the impresario's office. Liesel insisted she never left her mother's side, yet the corridor maid had seen her speaking urgently to someone in the shadows. Baron Klaus described the moment of discovery with photographic calm, yet a footman had heard him murmur, "At last, before the scream began, Poirot rose at the end of the morning. He stood very straight, still small, and looked toward the tall windows where snow continued to fall. The players have entered," he said softly. "Each has taken their mark. Each has spoken their opening lines. But who played truth, mon ami? And who played only memory? Every actor had taken their mark, but who played truth?" Chapter 3. The First Act. By the afternoon of 20th of January, 1935, the Vienna State Opera House had become a place of whispers and locked doors. Snow continued to fall outside, piling softly against the tall windows and turning the city into a monochrome stage set. Inside the private salon, the fire still burned steadily, sending the scent of wood smoke curling around the polished mahogany furniture. Fresh lilies had been replaced in their crystal vases, but their sweetness now carried an undertone of decay. Hercule Poirot sat alone for a moment, arranging a small silver coffee spoon, a folded napkin, and his own fountain pen into perfect alignment on the table. He drew a slow breath of the warm air, laced with coffee and faint cigar smoke that clung to the curtains. "The first act must deepen," he murmured. "The masks are still in place, but the strain begins. We watch now for the first crack." Poirot had spent the morning examining the royal box once more. The cold marble balustrades still held the ghost of gloved fingerprints. A thread of chill night air had entered through the slightly open window on the fatal evening. Someone had wanted fresh air, or perhaps to disperse a scent. On the carpet beside the shattered flute lay one small overlooked detail. A single drop of colourless liquid that had not come from the champagne. Poirot had it analysed discreetly by a chemist friend. The result confirmed what his nose had already told him. Prussic acid, cyanide, administered not in the bottle, but in a second, unnoticed glass. He summoned Otto Klein first that afternoon. The impresario entered briskly, portfolio under arm, smile fixed in place like stage makeup. He spoke at once of schedules, budgets, the necessity of reopening the house soon. Poirot listened, head tilted, green eyes gleaming. "You are most helpful, Monsieur Klein," Poirot said gently. "Always so efficient, always so quick to offer explanations." Otto's smile held. "I only wish to assist." Poirot opened a slim folder. The accounts of the opera subsidy, small irregularities, transfers to personal accounts, nothing enormous yet. But the Baroness had discovered them. She intended to speak with the board. She told her secretary so, on the 16th. Otto's left hand rose to adjust his collar, exactly the same gesture as before. This time it trembled. The performance? Otto protested with fluent indignation, voice rising just enough to sound wounded. The tell, but when he reached for the coffee cup Poirot had poured, his fingers shook so violently that a drop spilled onto the crisp linen napkin. The psychology. I am reminded of the Ackroyd affair. where a man performed outraged innocence with such skill that even the household believed him. He had rehearsed every inflection, every pause, every widening of the eyes before his mirror. Yet one small thing betrayed him. When offered a cigarette in the moment of supposed shock, his hand remained rock-steady. A truly innocent man in sudden crisis does not have steady hands for small actions. The body knows terror even when the face lies. The little grey cells understand this. The tremor is truth speaking when the voice will not. Here, Monsieur Klein reaches for coffee as though it were poison itself. The truth. Therefore you knew the Baroness planned to expose your embezzlement. The helpful manager is only costume. The performance crumbles. You see it now, non? Otto sat suddenly, face grey. He did not confess, not yet, but the mask had cracked. The confident lines faltered into silence. Poirot allowed the silence to stretch. Then he spoke softly to the invisible listener. Watch carefully, mon ami. The first mask has split along familiar lines. Greed performed as loyalty. Now loyalty performs as panic. The tension rises. Someone else will break character soon. Reflection. We humans are born without masks, yet society hands them to us before we can walk. The perfect patron, the devoted daughter, the grateful artist, the loyal manager, each role polished until it shines wrist. Beneath the shine lie the real motives: fear of ruin, hunger for applause, terror of being ordinary. We wear the masks because naked truth is too cold, too plain, too dangerous. In the Ackroyd household, a killer wore the mask of faithful secretary for years. He smiled at breakfast, sympathized at dinner, and all the while planned murder. Only when the spotlight of suspicion turned did the mask slip, and what emerged was not monstrous, but pitifully human. So, it is here. In this gilded opera house, the same ancient play unfolds. Every actor believes his performance flawless until the moment the prompter forgets the line. The question is never, who is guilty? The question is always, whose mask will crack first under the weight of truth? And when it does, the theatre changes forever. Poirot rose, smoothed his sleeve with precision. He looked toward the tall windows, where snowflakes pressed against the glass like silent audience members. The first act concludes, he said quietly. Some masks have cracked. More will follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. By the evening of 22nd January, 1935, the snow had stopped, leaving Vienna wrapped in crisp, brittle silence. Inside the private salon of the State Opera House, the fire had burned low. Only glowing embers sent faint wood smoke curling toward the high ceiling. The air carried the lingering sweetness of dying lilies, and the sharp bite of black coffee, and the warm leather scent of old program bindings stacked on a side table. Crystal glasses stood untouched on a silver tray. Their facets caught the last orange light from the hearth. Hercule Poirot sat in his usual chair, small hands folded, green eyes bright with quiet purpose. He had decided the time had come to press. Gently, precisely, like a director calling for a second take. The lines have been spoken once, he murmured. Now we test how well they hold when spoken again. Rehearsed lines always falter under repetition. Truth needs no rehearsal. He began with Carlotta Bianchi. She entered wearing a simple charcoal wool coat over black silk, yet every movement retained its stage grace. She sat without invitation, crossed her legs, and offered the same luminous smile that had captivated audiences. "You wish to speak again of the champagne?" she asked, voice soft, almost musical. "I have told you everything. It was a gift, a gesture, nothing more." Poirot poured black coffee into 2 porcelain cups. The rich, continental aroma rose between them. He passed one to her with a small bow. Mais oui, a gesture. Yet the bottle came from Monsieur Klein's private reserve. A reserve reserved for very special occasions. You did not ask for it in advance. You did not telephone. How then did he know to bring exactly that vintage? Carlotta's fingers tightened briefly on the saucer. A tiny clink of porcelain against porcelain. I mentioned it in passing during rehearsal the day before. Otto is attentive. He remembered. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. Attentive, yes. Yet the stage manager swears you were not in the rehearsal room at all that afternoon. You were seen leaving by the artist's entrance, alone, carrying a small parcel wrapped in the brown paper. A parcel the size of a medicine bottle, perhaps. The smile held, but the eyes flickered toward the door. People see what they wish to see, she said. I went to buy new stockings, nothing sinister. Poirot made an expressive gesture with his small hands. Stockings, of course. Yet observe, mon ami, he added softly, as though the listener sat beside him, how the voice drops half a tone on the lie. The performance strains. The script begins to show its seams. Next came Baron Klaus. He entered more slowly this time, shoulders slightly bowed. Grief performed with greater subtlety. He accepted coffee, sipped once, set the cup down with deliberate care. You wish to know again about the moment I found her? He asked. I have described it already. I returned from the gentleman's salon. She was, as you saw. Poirot nodded sympathetically. Indeed. Yet the footman who passed the corridor heard you murmur a single word before the scream began. At last. 2 small words. They changed the entire scene. The Baron's hand paused midway to the cup. For the first time the fingers showed the faintest tremor. A trick of hearing, he said. Grief confuses memory. Or relief, Poirot replied gently. Relief can sound very like grief when performed well. But the body does not lie so easily. See how your hand hesitates now. The mask grows heavy, Baron. It slips. Liesel was summoned last. She arrived wrapped in a soft cashmere shawl, the colour of pale smoke, eyes red-rimmed, genuine this time, or so it appeared. She sat on the edge of the chair, twisting the shawl's fringe. I told you the truth, she said quickly. I never left Mother's side, not once. Poirot opened a small notebook. The corridor maid is quite certain. A young lady, in rose silk, speaking in low, urgent tones to a gentleman whose face she could not see. The clock showed exactly 7 minutes past the hour. The precise time the poison would have begun its work. Liesel's breath caught. I stepped out for air. Only a moment I felt faint. Faint? Poirot echoed. Yet you returned composed enough to play the shocked daughter perfectly. No disarray, no tears that ruined the powder. A remarkable recovery. She looked down at her hands. The fringe twisted faster. The tension rises, Poirot said quietly to his invisible companion. Ah, see how each performance strains now. The Baron's steady voice cracks on small words. Carlotta's luminous eyes search for escape. Liesel's innocence trembles at the edges. If you were hiding guilt, mon ami, how long could you keep the mask in place? He allowed silence to settle like snow. Then he rose, small and immaculate, and walked to the tall window. Outside the street lamps glowed through the frost, turning the night into another stage. Rehearsed lines, he said softly, begin to falter when the audience watches too closely. The script fails because truth does not need a script. Truth simply is. He turned back to the empty room. The second act draws to its close. The players feel the spotlight burning. Soon one of them will forget the next line entirely. Rehearsed lines began to falter. To Chapter 5. The mask slips. The evening of 24th of January 1935 found the Vienna State Opera House dark and empty, except for the single working light above the stage. A lone spotlight cut through the gloom, painting a harsh white circle on the bare boards, where the orchestra pit usually hid. The vast auditorium smelled of dust, old velvet, and the faint ghost of yesterday's lilies. Cold air drifted from the unheated galleries. The chill made the crystal chandeliers above tinkle faintly whenever a door closed somewhere in the building. Hercule Poirot had asked that the house lights remain off. He wanted no distractions, only the truth naked under the spotlight. He had summoned Carlotta Bianchi alone. She arrived wrapped in a long black wool coat trimmed with silver fox. Beneath it, she wore the same black silk day dress from 2 days earlier. Her pearls caught the single beam of light as she stepped onto the stage. She paused at the edge of the circle, uncertain for the first time. "You wish to see me privately, Monsieur Poirot?" Her voice tried for its usual musical lilt, but arrived thinner, strained. Poirot stood centre stage, small, immaculate, hands clasped behind his back. He gestured toward a single wooden chair that had been placed under the light. "Sit, mademoiselle. Tonight we dispense with the audience. Tonight there is only the performer and the director." She hesitated, then walked forward. The heels of her shoes clicked sharply on the boards, each step loud in the silence. She sat, crossed her legs, lifted her chin in the old defiant way. "I have told you everything," she began. "The champagne was a gift. I had no reason—" Poirot raised one small hand. "No, no more lines from the script. We have heard them. We have seen them falter. Now we come to the moment when the mask must fall." He stepped closer, into the edge of the light. His shadow stretched long across the stage floor. "You played gratitude so beautifully, the tears perfectly timed, the voice trembling at exactly the right places. The audience believed, even Inspector Miller believed. But Hercule Poirot does not believe in perfect grief." Carlotta's fingers tightened on the arms of the chair. The wood creaked. "I love the Baroness," she whispered. "She was my patron, my future." "Yet she was about to become your past," Poirot said gently. "She had discovered your affair with Baron Klaus. Not a passing flirtation, no, a serious plan. You and he would marry after her death. She would be quietly divorced or quietly removed. But she learned. She confronted you. She threatened to ruin your career, to speak to the directors, to withdraw every florin of support. Without her money, Carlotta Bianchi would sing in smaller houses, or not at all. The soprano's breath came quicker. Her chest rose and fell beneath the silk. "That is fantasy," she said, "baseless." Poirot tilted his head. "Then why did you carry a small brown-wrapped parcel to the artist's entrance 2 days before the performance? Why did the chemist in the Graben remember selling you a vial of colourless liquid for a headache, you said, on the very same afternoon? Why did the stagehand see you slip into the Royal Box corridor during the first act, carrying nothing but a handkerchief, and return empty-handed?" Silence stretched. The chandelier tinkled once, softly, and as though the building itself held its breath. Carlotta's face changed. The luminous eyes filled, not with theatrical tears, but with real, hot, unstoppable one as mascara began to run in dark streaks down her perfect cheeks. Her shoulders shook, not artfully but raggedly, like a woman who has held herself together too long. I didn't want—" The words broke. She covered her face with both hands. The gloves were kid leather, soft and expensive. Now they were wet. Poirot stepped forward. He spoke very quietly. "The mask slips, mon ami," he said to the empty auditorium. "Did you see it? No more performance, no more perfect lines, only the woman beneath. Ambition wore the mask of gratitude. Fear wore the mask of innocence. Guilt wore the mask of sorrow. But guilt is the heaviest mask of all. Oh, eventually, it crushes the wearer." Carlotta lowered her hands. Her face was a ruin. Makeup smeared, eyes red, lips trembling without rehearsal. "I poisoned the second glass," she whispered, "the one she kept for later. I thought, if she drank it during the second act, no one would know. I only wanted time to convince Klaus to leave her quietly. I never wanted her to suffer." Poirot nodded once. "The intention does not change the result. The poison was prussic acid, quick, merciless. You placed it while the Baron stepped out. You returned to your dressing room. You waited for the scream." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I heard it from the wings. I thought it was finished. I thought I could step into her place. The lead roles, the money, the life I deserved." Poirot drew himself up, still small, yet somehow filling the stage. "The psychology is simple," he said. "Ambition is a hungry god. It demands sacrifice. You offered the Baroness, but the god is never satisfied. Guilt follows, and guilt always betrays the actor." The hands tremble. The eyes avoid the light. The voice cracks on small words. "You see it now, no?" Carlotta bowed her head. Sobs shook her whole body, raw, ugly, human. Poirot turned away for a moment, looking up into the dark galleries where invisible spectators might have sat. "The mask has fallen," he said softly. "Beneath it, the true face at last. Not a diva, not a murderess in cold blood. Only a frightened woman who believed the spotlight belonged to her alone." He gestured toward the wings. "The police wait outside, mademoiselle. The performance is over." Carlotta rose slowly. She looked small now, diminished without the mask. She walked toward the exit, heels no longer clicking with confidence, only dragging. The spotlight remained on the empty chair. Poirot stood alone in the circle of white light. "The mask had fallen," he said to the silent theatre. The true face emerged. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. The morning of 26th of January, 1935, dawned grey and heavy over Vienna. The State Opera House stood quiet, its grand doors locked to the public. Only a few caretakers moving through the corridors like stagehands after the final curtain. Inside the private salon, the fire had been freshly lit. Flames licked at new logs, sending the clean scent of pinewood smoke to mingle with strong coffee, and the faint dying perfume of lilies left too long in their vases, and the tall windows were fogged at the edges from the contrast of warm room and cold glass. A single ray of pale sunlight pierced the mist, catching motes of dust that danced like tiny performers in the beam. Hercule Poirot sat at the mahogany table, a small stack of letters, telegrams, and police reports arranged before him in perfect order. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, then smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "The masks have begun to fall," he murmured. "Now we go behind the curtain. There we find the ropes, the pulleys, the hidden mechanisms, and the secrets that move them all." He had spent the previous day in quiet conversations with secondary figures. The Baroness's secretary, the box attendant, the chemist in the Graben. Piece by piece, the backstage of the drama revealed itself. First, and the Baroness's private papers, locked in a small safe in the family suite at the Hotel Imperial, yielded a letter she had never posted. Written in her elegant, slanting hand 2 days before her death, It informed the opera board of certain financial irregularities discovered in the subsidy accounts. The irregularities pointed directly to Otto Klein. Embezzlement, small at first, then bolder, amounting to nearly 80,000 shillings over 3 years. The Baroness had intended to expose him at the next board meeting. Otto had known. His secretary confirmed he had received an urgent summons to the Baroness's suite the afternoon before the gala. Second came the Baron's secrets. A discreet inquiry at the Hotel Sacher revealed that Baron Klaus had kept a standing reservation for a private suite, not for business, but for discreet meetings, and the concierge remembered Carlotta Bianchi visiting there 3 times in the month prior to the murder. Love letters, burned but not completely, were recovered from the grate in the royal box the morning after the crime. Fragments showed passionate promises. When she is gone, we shall have everything: the house, the name, the life we deserve. The handwriting was Carlotta's. The Baron had not destroyed them thoroughly. Perhaps he could not bear to. Third, Liesel's small role in the shadows. The young woman had not been entirely innocent of knowledge. A maid in the family household recalled overhearing Liesel and her father arguing the week before. "You cannot do this to Mother," the girl had cried. "She has given everything." The Baron's reply had been cold. "She has given too much. It is time someone else took the stage." Liesel had known of the affair, perhaps even of the plan, but fear and love for her father had kept her silent. She had stepped into the corridor during intermission not for air, but to warn someone, likely Carlotta, that the Baroness suspected everything. Poirot arranged the fragments on the table like props. The half-burned letter, a hotel receipt, a torn scrap of notepaper. He spoke softly to the empty room. "Behind every curtain, mon ami, a secret waits. Greed behind loyalty, ambition behind gratitude, fear behind innocence, love twisted into complicity." The Baroness discovered the embezzlement and the affair. She threatened to pull every string that held this little theatre together. So the players acted together, not in conspiracy perhaps, but in desperate alignment. Otto supplied the means. Carlotta supplied the opportunity. The Baron supplied the motive. Liesel supplied the silence. He leaned back, green eyes gleaming in the firelight. Reflection. Humans do not wear masks only to deceive others. Often we wear them to deceive ourselves. We tell the mirror we are loyal when we burn with resentment. We tell the world we are grateful when we hunger for more. We tell our hearts we are innocent when complicity stains us. The weight of these masks grows heavier with every performance until something, a glance, a tremor, a single unguarded word, forces the curtain aside. I recall the passengers of the Orient Express, each wearing the mask of stranger, each hiding a shared guilt. They performed shock, grief, outrage with such conviction that for a moment even I hesitated. Yet beneath the costumes lay one unifying motive: revenge dressed as justice. Here in Vienna, the motives are smaller, more personal: money, love, position, but the mechanism is the same. The stage conceals what the drawing room cannot. The spotlight reveals what candlelight hides. Every secret backstage has its counterpart in motive, and every motive, once exposed, strips the actor bare. We watch because we recognize the play. We recognize it because we have all, at some moment, worn a mask too long. Poirot rose and walked to the window. He traced a finger through the condensation on the glass, drawing a small, perfect question mark. "Behind every curtain, a secret," he said quietly. "Behind every secret, a motive. The final act approaches. The ropes are visible now. Soon the curtain will fall, not on the stage, but on the performers. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The evening of 28th January 1935 transformed the private salon of the Vienna State Opera House into a courtroom disguised as a stage. Heavy velvet curtains had been drawn across the tall windows, shutting out the snowlit night. A single crystal chandelier burned low overhead, its pendants tinkling softly whenever someone shifted in their chair. The air held the rich scent of Cuban cigar smoke. Baron Klaus had lit one earlier, then crushed it out. Expensive cologne, strong black coffee, and the faint, persistent perfume of dying lilies. A long mahogany table stood center stage. 5 chairs faced it in a semicircle. Hercule Poirot stood at the head, not seated, small, immaculate, hands clasped behind his back. He had summoned the entire cast, and they entered one by one and took their places like actors responding to a final call. Baron Klaus von Hohenberg sat first, silver hair gleaming under the light, face composed but pale. Liesl followed, wrapped in pale grey cashmere, eyes wide and frightened. Otto Klein arrived clutching a leather portfolio he no longer opened, collar already loosened. Rudolf Lange entered last, cool and detached, taking the end chair as though he were merely an interested spectator. Carlotta Bianchi was brought in last, escorted by 2 quiet policemen, still in black silk, but without makeup, without poise. Her face looked raw, stripped. Poirot waited until the door closed with a soft final click. Then he spoke, voice clear and measured, carrying to every corner of the room. Mesdames et messieurs, the curtain has been drawn for the final act. You have each performed for Hercule Poirot. Some performances were truthful, some were not. Tonight we review them all. No more masks, no more lines, only truth. He turned first to Baron Klaus. You, Baron, played the grieving widower with classical restraint. The steady voice, the dry eyes, the comforting hand on your daughter's shoulder. Admirable. Yet grief performed so perfectly leaves no room for the real. A truly shocked man trembles. He reaches for small comforts, a cigarette, a glass, with unsteady fingers. You did not. Your hands remained rock-steady when you described finding your wife. Why? Because you already knew she was dead. You had seen the second glass. You had smelled the bitter almonds. And you had said, before the scream, at last, relief, not grief. In the mask of the devoted husband concealed a man who wished his wife gone, so he could claim both fortune and mistress. The Baron's cigar hand twitched once. He said nothing. Poirot turned to Liesl. You, mademoiselle, played the innocent daughter, the wide eyes, the trembling lip, the handkerchief pressed to a dry face. Yet innocent daughters do not lie about their movements during the fatal intermission. You left the box. You spoke urgently in the corridor, not for air, but to warn someone. You knew of the affair. You knew of your father's plan. You kept silent out of love and fear. But silence is also a performance, and yours cracked when the maid's testimony was repeated. Liesl bowed her head. A single tear, real this time, fell onto her lap. Next, Otto Klein. You performed the loyal manager, efficient, helpful. He always ready with papers and explanations. Yet loyal managers do not falsify ledgers. They do not panic when the Baroness threatens exposure. They do not supply poison when ruin approaches. You gave Carlotta the means, the prussic acid from your private stock, the bottle from your reserve. You hoped her success would secure your position, but helpfulness masking guilt is the oldest role in the theatre. Your trembling hand betrayed you long before your words. Otto's portfolio slipped to the floor. He made no move to retrieve it. Poirot's gaze moved to Rudolph Lange. You, monsieur, played the disinterested rival, cool, detached, above petty quarrels over subsidy. Yet you stood to gain most if the Baroness died before withdrawing her opposition to your proposed merger with the opera's rival patron fund. You were seen in the corridor, briefly, during intermission. You spoke to Liesel. You knew enough to profit. But you played no active part, only watched. The role of innocent bystander suits some actors well, until the spotlight finds them. Lange met Poirot's eyes without flinching. Yet his fingers drummed once on the chair arm, once only. Finally, Poirot turned to Carlotta. And you, Mademoiselle Bianchi, gave the most convincing performance of all. The grateful artist, the devastated friend, the tears, perfectly timed, the voice breaking at exactly the right moment. Magnifique! You walked onto this stage as Rosalind and left it as the leading lady in a tragedy of your own making. You poisoned the second glass while the Baron stepped out. You returned to the wings and waited for the scream. You believed the spotlight would then be yours. The roles, the money, the Baron, the life. But one small moment undid the entire performance. He stepped closer. During the waltz, when the music reached its glittering peak, you looked up toward the royal box, not with sorrow, not with horror, with triumph. A single glance, fleeting, unguarded. The eyes held no grief, only victory. That was the moment the mask slipped completely. The diva forgot her lines. The murderess revealed herself. Carlotta's shoulders collapsed. She covered her face with both hands. No sound came, only the shaking of her body. Poirot drew himself up, still small, yet commanding the entire room. The performances are reviewed. The roles are stripped. The curtain falls. The truth takes her bow. He made one small, expressive gesture with his hands. The police will now take those who must answer. The rest of you will live with the roles you chose to play. Silence followed, deep, final, like the moment after the last note dies. Poirot turned toward the invisible audience that had followed every scene. The final act concludes, he said softly. Only truth survives the curtain call. The final act concluded. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The night of 29th of January, 1935, settled cold and final over Vienna. Inside the State Opera House, the grand foyer lay empty. Its crystal chandeliers dimmed to a soft amber glow. The scent of furniture wax lingered on the polished mahogany, mixed now with the faint acrid trace of cigar smoke that had drifted from the private salon earlier. Velvet curtains hung motionless. No rustle of silk gowns disturbed the silence. Only the distant chime of the grandfather clock marked time, slow, inexorable, like the closing bars of a requiem. Outside, snow had begun again, muffling the city so completely that the building felt like the last lit stage in a darkened theatre. The arrests had been swift and quiet. Carlotta Bianchi was taken first, led through a side door by two plainclothes officers, her black silk coat draped over her shoulders like a discarded costume. She walked without resistance, head bowed, the proud carriage of the diva gone. Otto Klein followed, handcuffed discreetly beneath his overcoat, portfolio left behind on the salon table, like forgotten props. He spoke once to the inspector. I only wanted to save the season, then fell silent. Baron Klaus von Hohenberg was not arrested that night. The evidence of complicity stopped short of direct action. but 2 detectives remained at his suite in the Hotel Imperial. He sat alone in the drawing-room there, staring at an unlit cigar, the silver case open on the table before him. Liesel von Hohenberg returned to the family apartment under police escort. She moved like someone waking from a long dream, slow, uncertain. The maid who had served the household for 15 years met her at the door with a cup of hot coffee, laced with sweet liqueur. Liesel took it without speaking, then sat by the window, watching the snow fall against the glass. For the first time since childhood, she did not twist her handkerchief or rehearse her expression. She simply existed, raw, unmasked. Rudolf Lange departed the opera house last. He paused in the foyer, adjusted his scarf with precise fingers, and looked back toward the closed doors of the salon. No one spoke to him. No charges were laid, yet. But the cool detachment he had worn so easily now felt thinner, colder. He stepped out into the snow and disappeared into the night. Hercule Poirot remained behind in the salon after the others had gone. He stood alone beneath the low chandelier, small hands clasped behind his back. The fire had burned down to glowing coals, their warmth barely reached the corners of the room. He walked slowly to the table where the evidence still lay arranged, the half-burned letters. The hotel receipt, the chemist's receipt, the baroness's unposted note to the board. One by one he gathered them into a neat stack, then placed them inside his slim leather case. "Observe, mon ami," he said quietly to the empty chairs. "The performance is finished. No curtain calls, no bouquets thrown from the gallery. Only justice, slow, methodical, without applause." He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. The green eyes reflected the dying firelight. The theatre of crime always ends this way. The actors who played their parts too long are led away. The innocent, or nearly innocent, are left to face the empty auditorium. They must learn to live without the mask. Some will find another role, another stage, but none will forget this night. He crossed to the tall window and looked out. Snowflakes pressed against the glass like silent spectators who had stayed until the very end. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolled midnight, deep, resonant, final. Inspector Müller appeared at the doorway, hat in hand, tweed coat dusted with snow. "Monsieur Poirot, the statements are being typed. The prosecutor will move quickly. Carlotta Bianchi has already confessed fully. Klein is talking, trying to shift blame, but the ledgers don't lie. The Baron, we watch him closely." Poirot nodded once. Order and method have done their work. The psychology revealed the rest. Greed performed as loyalty. Ambition performed as gratitude. Fear performed as innocence. But truth does not perform. Truth simply waits. Müller hesitated. "You will leave soon?" "Tomorrow. The Orient Express departs at 10. Vienna has been a most interesting stage, but Hercule Poirot has other theatres to attend." The inspector touched his hat brim in salute and left. The door closed softly behind him. Poirot remained a moment longer. He arranged 3 small objects on the mantel: a silver cigar cutter, a folded programme from the fatal night, and a single kid glove Carlotta had dropped during her confession, into perfect symmetry. Then he turned off the last lamp. The room fell into darkness lit only by the embers. He walked through the empty foyer, footsteps echoing on the parquet. The chandelier tinkled once as he passed beneath it, a faint farewell note. At the great doors he paused, looked back toward the shadowed auditorium. No one applauded. No one called for an encore. The players had been stripped of their roles. The audience had gone home. Only justice remained, quiet, cold, and complete. He stepped out into the snow. The night air bit at his cheeks. He drew his scarf tighter and walked toward the waiting taxi, small figure vanishing into the white silence. No applause for this performance. Chapter 9. After the show, by the first week of February 1935, Vienna had begun to thaw. Snow turned to grey slush along the Ringstrasse. The sharp chill of January softened into damp February air that carried the faint promise of spring. Inside the Vienna State Opera House, the grand auditorium stood empty during the day, its velvet seats covered with dust sheets, the crystal chandeliers wrapped in muslin like sleeping performers. The scent of furniture wax had returned, stronger now, as cleaners worked to erase every trace of the tragedy. Fresh hothouse roses, white and perfect, had been placed in tall crystal vases in the foyer once more, their sweetness cutting through the lingering wood smoke of the private salon. The house would reopen in 10 days with a new production of Der Rosenkavalier. Life, like any good theatre, refused to stay dark for long. Liesel von Hohenberg had moved back into the family apartment on the Schubertring. The vast rooms, once filled with her mother's commanding presence, now echoed with a different quiet. She had dismissed most of the staff. Only the old maid who had known her since childhood remained. Liesel spent mornings at the writing desk in the sunlit salon, going through her mother's papers with careful hands. She wore simple wool dresses now. No silk, no rose tints. Her face had lost its rehearsed fragility. The wide eyes had narrowed into something steadier, more thoughtful. She had inherited everything, the estates, the fortune, the controlling interest in the opera's subsidy. The board had expected protest, perhaps scandal. Instead, Liesel appeared before them in a plain grey suit, voice calm and clear. "Ah, my mother gave her life to this house," she said. "I will not allow her work to be tainted by what happened. The subsidy continues, under stricter accounts. No more private reserves, no more hidden transfers. We begin again, with honesty." The board had stared, then nodded. Some had even applauded, quietly, almost in relief. Liesel had not smiled. She had simply bowed once and left the room, heels clicking steadily on the marble. Baron Klaus von Hohenberg had retreated to the family estate outside Salzburg. The grand house there, surrounded by snow-covered pines, felt colder than Vienna ever had. He spent his days walking the frozen paths, gloved hands in the pockets of his rough tweed coat. The silver cigar case remained in his study drawer, unopened. Letters from old friends arrived. He answered none, and the police had questioned him twice more, but no charges were brought. Complicity stopped short of proof. Yet the Baron knew the truth lived in his own silence. He had lost his wife, his mistress, his illusions of control. What remained was a man stripped of role, neither grieving widower nor triumphant lover, just Klaus. He stared at the mountains each evening as the light faded, wondering if he would ever step onto another stage. Carlotta Bianchi awaited trial in a women's prison on the outskirts of the city. The cell was small, clean, cold. No silk gowns, no pearls, no spotlight. She had refused visitors, even the impresario who once promised her the world. In the quiet hours, she sang softly to herself, not arias, but old Neapolitan songs her mother had taught her as a child, as the voice that once filled opera houses now filled only stone walls. She had confessed everything in a long tear-stained statement. No excuses, no performances, only the bare facts: ambition, fear, poison, regret. The prosecutor called it a crime of passion and calculation. Carlotta called it a mistake I will pay for every day I breathe. Her mask was gone forever. What remained was a woman learning slowly to live without one. Otto Klein had been released on bail pending trial, but the opera dismissed him immediately. He took a small furnished room near the Westbahnhof, far from the glittering centre. He spent his days poring over ledgers, not the opera's, but his own pitiful savings. The embezzlement charges would ruin him financially. The accessory to murder charge would ruin him forever. He no longer adjusted his collar nervously, and the gesture had lost its meaning. He simply sat, staring at the wall, replaying every small decision that had led him here. One afternoon he wrote a single letter to Liesel. "I was never loyal," it read. "I was only afraid. Your mother saw that. I wish I had seen it sooner." He did not post it. He burned it in the small iron stove instead. The ashes smelled briefly of paper and regret. The opera house itself began its slow transformation. Workmen repaired the royal box. New velvet curtains were hung, deep crimson to replace the midnight blue. The board announced that the next gala would be dedicated to Baroness Elsa von Hohenberg, not as victim, but as patron. A small plaque would be placed beside the box, in memory of her vision and generosity. No mention of poison, no mention of masks. The theatre, after all, prefers beautiful endings. Hercule Poirot had left Vienna 2 days after the arrests. He had taken the Orient Express back toward Paris, sitting in his usual compartment with a cup of strong continental coffee and a plate of fine pastries. Through the window, the Austrian countryside rolled past, snow giving way to bare fields giving way to the first green hints of spring. He had spoken little during the journey. Only once, to the attendant, had he murmured, "The curtain has fallen. The actors have gone home. Now the theatre rests until the next performance." Back in Vienna, the lessons lingered like perfume in an empty room. Liesel learned to stand without leaning on anyone's arm. The Baron learned the weight of silence. Carlotta learned the cost of wanting too much. Otto learned that helpfulness can hide nothing forever, and the opera house learned that beauty can survive scandal, if truth is allowed to take its bow. The theatre emptied slowly. The last workman locked the doors. The chandeliers slept under their muslin. But the lessons remained, quiet, enduring, waiting for the next cast to arrive. The theatre emptied. The lessons remained. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. The Orient Express glided smoothly through the French countryside on the morning of 31st January, 1935. Hercule Poirot occupied his favourite compartment, first class of course, where the polished mahogany panels gleamed under soft reading lamps, and the faint scent of leather upholstery mingled with the rich aroma of the tisane he had just prepared. A small silver tray held a porcelain cup of lemon-scented herbal infusion. A single crisp biscuit and a folded copy of Le Figaro. Outside the window, bare winter fields rolled past under a pale sky. Inside, the compartment was warm, orderly, perfect. Poirot sat in his usual armchair, small hands folded neatly in his lap, green eyes half closed in reflection. The case of the Vienna Waltz of Death was closed. The curtain had fallen. Now came the quiet moment when Hercule Poirot reviewed the entire performance, not for applause, but for understanding. He sipped the tisane slowly, letting the warmth spread through him. The little grey cells, so active during the investigation, now turned inward. Why do people perform rather than reveal the simple truth? He asked the empty compartment. Fear, of course. Fear of judgment, fear of loss, fear of being ordinary. Society is itself a vast theatre. It demands roles. The devoted husband, the grateful artist, the loyal manager, the innocent daughter. Each role polished until it shines, yet beneath the shine lies the real motive. Greed dressed as necessity, ambition dressed as love, silence dressed as loyalty. When the Baroness threatened to tear down the scenery, the actors panicked. They did not conspire in a dark room with maps and daggers. They simply aligned, each protecting their own mask until the masks themselves became the murder weapon. He set the cup down with precision and touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. Guilt always betrays the actor. The body knows what the mouth denies. Carlotta's eyes, during the final waltz, held triumph instead of sorrow. A single glance, unguarded, and the entire performance collapsed. Otto's hand trembled when he reached for coffee. The Baron's remained too steady when he spoke of discovery. Liesel's handkerchief stayed dry, even when her voice broke. These are not clues of the detective novel. These are clues of the human soul. The little grey cells do not chase fingerprints or footprints. They chase the tremor, the flicker, the hesitation. Truth does not rehearse. Lies rehearse endlessly, until the rehearsal shows. He leaned back, gazing at the passing landscape. I am reminded of a certain affair aboard this very train, the Orient Express itself. 12 passengers, each wearing the mask of stranger. Each performed shock, grief, outrage with such conviction that for a moment even Hercule Poirot hesitated. They had rehearsed their alibis in whispers, practiced their expressions in darkened compartments. Yet the psychology remained the same. Guilt is a chorus. It cannot stay silent forever. One small inconsistency, the position of a watch, the angle of a wound, and the collective mask cracked. Revenge wore the costume of justice. Here in Vienna, the motives were smaller, more intimate, money, position, passion, but the betrayal of the body was identical. Carlotta forgot her lines in a single triumphant glance. The Baron's relief slipped out in 2 whispered words. The same principle. The actor believes himself flawless until the spotlight of truth finds the flaw. Poirot arranged the teaspoon, the saucer, and the biscuit into perfect symmetry on the tray. The psychology of revelation is cruelly simple. We wear masks because naked truth is cold. Society applauds the perfect performance. It punishes the stumble. Yet the mask grows heavier with every act. The shoulders tire. The eyes tire. The voice tires. Hid eventually something, a gesture, a silence, a look, forces the curtain aside. And what is revealed is rarely monstrous. It is only human. Frightened, greedy, lonely, desperate. We pity the murderer once the mask falls, not because the crime is excused, but because we recognize the face beneath. We have all worn a mask too long at some moment in our lives. He smiled faintly, a small private smile. In Vienna the theatre has emptied. Liesel von Hohenberg learns to walk without leaning on anyone's arm. She will become a better patron than her mother ever was, because she has seen what happens when beauty is built on lies. The Baron retreats into silence. Perhaps one day he will forgive himself, perhaps not. Carlotta sings in a stone cell. Her voice, stripped of artifice, may yet find something true. Otto stares at empty ledgers. Helpfulness can hide nothing forever. Rudolf Lang continues his cool games in other boardrooms, but he will always wonder who watches him now. Poirot lifted the tisane again, savouring the last warm sip. The truth triumphs over performance because truth does not need to convince. It simply is. Lies must be defended, explained, repeated. Truth stands still and waits. In the end, the little inconsistencies, the tremor, the dry handkerchief, the unguarded glance, accumulate until the stage collapses under its own weight. Order and method reveal what passion conceals. The psychology, it is everything. He set the cup down for the final time and looked out at the approaching spires of Paris. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis, he said softly to the empty compartment, Poirot will be watching. The train whistle sounded once, long, mournful, fading into the distance. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis, Poirot watches always.